AMD's latest 3000 series processors are proving to be the best thing since sliced bread. Or at the very least, the best thing since they figured out they could ferment bread and put it into cans. But if you built a gaming rig last year, should you consider an upgrade to one of these chips? Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff. Last year when the Ryzen 5 2600 launched, it overtook Intel, in my mind, for the best value CPU at $200. And in the 15 months since then, it's been pretty hard to beat. You get 6 cores, 12 threads, and a 3.4 GHz base clock, all for that $199 price point. Looking over at options from Intel, you could have gone with an i5 9400 for only $185. However, that is only a 6-core, 6-threaded CPU and only has a measly 2.9 GHz base clock. Jumping up to an overclockable SKU costs you $260 in the i5 9600K. That CPU also required a much more expensive Z370 motherboard to enable overclocking. So for the past year, the Ryzen 5 2600 has been my budget gaming PC CPU of choice. And paired with a GTX 1066GB or an RX 588GB, you can play pretty much any game at 1080p, usually well exceeding 60 frames per second. And strangely enough, that is pretty much the PC that we have here. This is a Ryzen 5 2600 on an MSI B450i motherboard. We've got 16GB of Corsair Vengeance 3000 MHz DDR4 and an 8GB RX 580 from XFX. If you were to ask me around this time last year what my choice for a sub $1,000 gaming PC would have been, this is exactly the box I would have given you. And that brings us to the question in today's video. Let's say I built this rig a year ago, and today I have $200 burning a hole in my pocket, and a PC upgrade is the only possible way to fill it. Should I buy AMD's all-new Ryzen 5 3600 for $199 to take advantage of all 15% of that IPC improvement on the 7nm process? Or would my money be better spent elsewhere? Both CPUs are 6 cores, 12 threads, and rated for 65 watts. However, the Ryzen 5 3600 does have a 200 MHz higher base clock and 300 MHz higher boost clock. But how well will that actually translate into game performance? Starting with our synthetics, and the results are pretty prophetic, and you'll see why in just a minute. 3D Mark Time Spy and Firestrike both saw about a 1.5% increase in the overall score and about a 15 to 16% increase in the CPU-based tests. Cinebench R15 shows probably our most dramatic results for the day, scoring a 195 in single-threaded and a 1559 in multi-threaded. This is a full 22 and 24% faster than the Ryzen 5 2600 respectively. I will be showing Cinebench R20 results on the channel here before too long, but as of right now I haven't had a chance to benchmark all of my CPUs with the new test yet, and for today's testing I really wanted a larger subset of results to compare with. Moving into our gaming results, and we see improvements nearly across the board with the Ryzen 5 3600. I say nearly across the board because there were 2 titles that were definitely GPU bound, and that was Shadow of the Tomb Raider and GTA 5. Both games saw nearly identical results for the average frame rate and even the 1 and 0.1% lows. Tomb Raider did manage to stay above 80 FPS for most of the time, however GTA did struggle to hit 60, averaging just 57. And while that 57 FPS number isn't necessarily impressive, it also managed a 0.1% low of just 41. So while the game wasn't PC Master Race approved at 60 FPS on average, it didn't exactly run poorly either. Moving on to the rest of our games testing, the recently released Borderlands Remaster, Doom with its Vulkan API, Project Cars 2, and Rocket League all scored between a 2 and 5% increase in the average frames per second. Probably the more impressive metric in those benchmarks, though, is the increase in the 1% low frame rate, seeing between a 7 and 32% improvement in all 4 titles. Still not impressed? Well, let's add CSGO to that list, and we see between a 10 and 46% improvement in the 0.1% low FPS. And Hitman 2 was there to buck the trend just a little bit, with a 14% average FPS increase and just a 2.2% increase in the 0.1% low. So, if you built this Ryzen 5 2600 powered rig last year, is it worth it to spend the $200 to upgrade to a Ryzen 5 3600? Surprisingly, as great as these benchmarks were, the answer is probably no. The average frame rate in games only increased by about 5.4%, and 9.7 and 12.8% respectively in the 1% and 0.1% low frame rates. As impressive as those results are for just a CPU swap, it didn't exactly supercharge my gaming experience either. Hitman 2 and CSGO were the only games to see double-digit % performance increases in the average FPS. But is 95 FPS any more playable than 83? How about 313 instead of 270? My point is, while it is a very impressive result, it didn't exactly help the games. And if you're going to argue competitive play, inside of CSGO you're only seeing frames about 0.3 milliseconds faster than you normally would. And I don't know about you superhumans out there, but I certainly couldn't see any perceptible difference. However, I'm going to warn you, do not take that opinion the wrong way. This video sought to answer a very basic question of should I upgrade from a Ryzen 5 2600 to a Ryzen 5 3600? Not how good is the Ryzen 3600? I can hear some of your angry keyboards already click-clacking away. The Ryzen 5 3600 is an insane performance CPU at $199. And just to prove that point, look at my Cinemage R15 numbers from a little while ago. Let's add a very key line item in the i7-8700K. Both CPUs are 6-core 12-threaded parts, and in the multi-threaded test, they tied. And I don't mean they came really close to each other, they tied with 1,559 points. Intel did maintain a very slight edge in the single-threaded performance, scoring a 201 versus the 195 of the Ryzen 5 3600. However, remember, Intel also has a much faster single-threaded CPU boost clock, and the Ryzen 5 3600 is doing this at just 65 watts instead of the 95 required by the 8700K. Now I'm sure the 8700K would still win straight up when overclocked. I was able to get a 216 single-threaded score at 4.9 GHz on that 8700K. But remember, this is an entry-level 6-core part from AMD that only costs $199. That 8700K is still $349 today. But also keep in mind, I'm still on the 3000 MHz memory from my Zen Plus CPU. I will be dropping in some 3600 MHz memory in the very near future and starting to stretch the legs of this 3600. I might even make that video an overclock battle between the 8700K to see which is the better platform today, straight up. But I think I'm going to leave you with this conclusion for today. I get questions all the time about should I upgrade from Y part to X part, and my answer is usually very simple. Does your computer still do what you want it to do, and how much faster do you need to go? There is usually always an upgrade out there to increase your gaming speed. Upgrading your graphics card, getting more or faster memory, getting more or faster storage, upgrading to the latest and greatest CPU technology. Unless of course you bought an Intel motherboard in the last 10 years. But ultimately the answer to that question I can't answer. It has to come from you. What do you want to get out of your system and how much money do you want to spend doing it? The reason I focused on this upgrade itself, the 2600 to the 3600, is I get questions like this a lot. I have a Ryzen 5 2600, should I upgrade to the 3600? I have a GTX 1060, should I upgrade to a GTX 1660? I have an RX 580, should I upgrade to an RX 590? The answer to that question is always no. If you own a part today and you're only moving up one generation, but you're going to be buying the same exact tier of part that you did before, you're not going to get the performance gains that you think you are. You're only going to move up between 5 and 15% on average, regardless of the part that you replace. Upgrading multiple generations at once or upgrading the tier of part that you bought is how you get performance increases. If you have a Ryzen 5 1600 or lower, absolutely I would recommend the 3600 as an upgrade today. You'll see between a 20 and 30% improvement depending on the task that you're running. But at the end of the day, the only one who can decide if it's worth it to upgrade is you. It's your money. I can tell you what the performance will be, and in this case, it's about 5 to 15% more. But is that worth it to you? That's up for you to decide. That's going to do it for me in this one, guys, but before you go, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you have planned for your next upgrade. What parts do you have now, and what parts do you plan on purchasing? Genuinely curious to find out what's on your wish list. Oh, and make sure to visit those Amazon affiliate links down in the video description as well. I've got a full build guide for this system here, as well as everything you need for your next build or upgrade. Make sure to like this video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. Follow me on Twitter at Craft Computing, and if you'd like to financially back the channel, make sure to look me up on Patreon. A minimum donation of $1 a month gets you access to my exclusive Discord server, where you can chat with myself and the other hosts from Talking Heads. Thank you all so much for watching this one, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.